What if I told you that one late-night social media post, a single message dropped online while most people were asleep, managed to shake world politics in a way no one expected? What if a few emotional lines, written in the heat of the moment, ended up creating one of the biggest diplomatic storms of the decade? Tonight, we're diving deep into a story that feels almost unbelievable. A story where a routine global summit turned into a geopolitical earthquake. A story where Donald Trump's sudden decision didn't just target one country, it triggered a ripple effect that could reshape the entire world order. This is not just about South Africa. It's not just about the G20. This is about the global balance of power and how it might be shifting faster than anyone realized. Let's rewind to where everything began. It started with a post, not a classified memo, not an official statement, not a carefully worded diplomatic message. No, it was a Truth Social update, typed and shared abruptly, without filters, without advisors, without caution. Trump announced that under his direct order, the United States would block South Africa from attending the 2026 G20 Summit. But he didn't stop there. He declared that all U.S. aid, funding, cooperative programs, and development support for South Africa would be halted immediately. One sentence after another, the message grew heavier, like someone was cutting ties with a chainsaw, not a scalpel. No negotiation, no warning, no soft landing, just a political guillotine dropped in real time. Inside the White House, confusion exploded like fireworks. Phones rang non-stop. Advisors rushed out of late-night meetings. Diplomats stared at their screens, trying to decide whether this was a serious piece of policy or a moment of presidential anger that somehow slipped through the cracks. The speed of the announcement, the tone, and the timing made everything feel chaotic, almost reckless. But the world didn't wait for answers. Markets reacted instantly. Analysts went on emergency broadcasts. Newsrooms jumped into breaking news mode. And in Pretoria, South African officials were left stunned, trying to understand how relations with the world's most powerful country had broken apart so violently over what appeared to be a procedural dispute at the G20. But was it really just a procedural dispute? Inside Washington, a deep and dramatic divide formed overnight. It wasn't just a disagreement, it was a clash of two interpretations, one emotional, one strategic, with both sides believing they were absolutely correct. One faction insisted Trump's move was pure retaliation. They argued he felt personally insulted when South Africa refused to hand over the G20 presidency to a senior US diplomat. To them, the refusal wasn't a simple procedural decision. It was a rejection of American leadership. And Trump, who prides himself on dominance, took it as a personal affront. These officials pointed to the speed of his response, the sharpness of his words, the lack of bureaucratic input. To them it was obvious. This was Trump reacting emotionally, using national policy as a tool of personal payback. But the other camp, calm, confident, and quietly smug, had a completely different perspective. They claimed Trump had been waiting for a moment like this. They argued that South Africa had been drifting toward BRICS for years, aligning with China, warming up to Russia, taking stances that increasingly sided with the global South rather than the West. According to them, Trump wasn't acting out of anger, he was acting out of clarity. This was a calculated strike meant to expose countries that benefited from American economic access while politically supporting America's rivals. And then came the third theory, from analysts outside the government, which made the situation even more complicated. They believed Trump's move had little to do with South Africa itself. Instead, they claimed the G20 was the real target. They said Trump had long been skeptical of multilateral institutions, and by pushing a key member like South Africa into crisis, he could destabilize or reshape the G20 to America's advantage. No one knew for sure which theory was right. Maybe all three had some truth, maybe none did, but the uncertainty made the situation even more volatile. Meanwhile, in Pretoria, disbelief quickly turned to outrage, and that outrage transformed into something even more powerful: resolve. South African officials understood what had happened. They knew the consequences could be enormous, and yet something inside them hardened. If the US was willing to sever ties so brutally, so abruptly over a disagreement, then perhaps it was time to rethink everything, including their alliances. But before Pretoria could respond, Washington made its next move. Inside the State Department, officials began drafting a terrifying list, a catalog of punitive measures outlining exactly how far the United States could go if Trump chose escalation. The list wasn't shared publicly, but leaks spread like wildfire, and what the world heard next only deepened the fear. The first major option targeted sanctions. Sanctions that wouldn't hit ordinary citizens but would instead go after elites, Cabinet ministers, political financiers, state-linked executives. These were people who normally existed within the soft protection of diplomacy. Suddenly they were being evaluated as potential targets. The second option, cutting development funding. The economic lifeline supporting everything from healthcare to agriculture to energy modernization. Losing this funding would not be symbolic, it would be devastating. Trump's allies saw this as strategic leverage. His critics saw it as dangerously close to economic coercion. But the biggest bombshell was yet to come. The one option analysts described as the economic nuclear strike, the possibility of removing South Africa from AGOA, the African Growth and Opportunity Act. AGOA is not just a trade program, it's one of the cornerstones of South Africa's export economy. Losing access would trigger immediate tariffs, collapsing profit margins, and potentially massive job losses. Global markets instantly reacted. Investors hesitated. Traders braced for supply disruptions. Energy experts warned of ripple effects that could reach Europe and Asia. Then came the quiet pressure tactics, delaying visas, dragging out negotiations, discouraging American companies from investing. Not dramatic on their own, but deadly when combined. And this is where everything changed. In Pretoria, something snapped. Not in fear, but in determination. South Africa didn't retreat. It pivoted, fast. Suddenly, diplomacy with BRICS accelerated at lightning speed. China offered financial support and investment deals. Russia framed the crisis as proof of Western hypocrisy and overreach. India and Brazil expressed solidarity. South Africa, once cautiously balancing between the West and the global South, now seemed ready to fully step into the BRICS orbit. It didn't stop at diplomacy. Economic plans shifted. Energy deals fast-tracked. Digital infrastructure projects with China accelerated. And discussions around de-dollarization, once slowly explored, now became a national priority. South Africa wasn't backing down, it was breaking free. Then came the emotional wave, a surge of nationwide frustration at the US civil groups, unions, political parties, and ordinary citizens rallied around the idea that South Africa would not bow to external pressure. Anti-American sentiments skyrocketed. Suddenly, defying the US wasn't just a foreign policy stance, it became a symbol of national pride. Meanwhile, in Washington, lawmakers warned that Trump had created a geopolitical disaster. Instead of isolating South Africa, the US had pushed it deeper into BRICS. Instead of weakening its global position, Trump had turned South Africa into a symbol of resistance, a symbol other countries in the global South were now watching closely. This backlash wasn't limited to Africa. Across the continent, leaders spoke with rare unity. Kenya, Nigeria, Ethiopia, and Egypt condemned the US decision. Even US-friendly governments publicly criticized the move. They feared that Washington had set a dangerous precedent, one that could one day be used against them. The African Union issued a sharp statement, calling the US action destabilizing and dangerous. In Europe, confusion and discomfort spread quickly. European leaders were already uneasy about South Africa's growing alignment with BRICS, but they were equally alarmed by Trump's unilateralism. Some European diplomats claimed that Trump had done more to strengthen BRICS in 48 hours than Beijing and Moscow had managed in years. Others worried that the G20 itself, an institution already struggling, might not survive the fracture. And in BRICS capitals, the reaction was almost celebratory. Moscow said the US had exposed its true nature. Beijing called for a new world order based on respect and equality. India and Brazil, usually cautious, stepped forward to support South Africa. Then came the final twist, the one no one expected. Instead of collapsing under pressure, South Africa emerged stronger, not economically, not immediately, but politically and symbolically. Pretoria became a central figure in the global South narrative, a symbol of a world pushing back against Western dominance, a symbol of nations searching for alternative alliances. Financial markets sensed that something permanent had changed. Analysts warned that US influence in Africa had weakened dramatically, maybe even irreversibly. If South Africa deepened its integration with BRICS, others might follow. It could accelerate a trend that had already been quietly forming for years, the slow decline of Western dominance and the rise of a fragmented multipolar world. By the end of the week, one truth was unavoidable. Trump didn't just retaliate against South Africa. He didn't just punish a single country. He triggered a global chain reaction, one that could reshape alliances, institutions, and power balances for years. This wasn't caused by war, not by sanctions, not by a global crisis. It was caused by a post. One post, late at night, dropped into the world without warning. And now, As leaders from Washington to Beijing rethink their strategies, one question echoes across every diplomatic corridor. Did the world just witness the moment global power shifted? Are we watching the slow collapse of American primacy and the rise of a new multipolar era, with BRICS at its center? Let me know in the comments. Is this the beginning of a new world order, or just the calm before a much bigger geopolitical storm? Thanks for watching.